Welcome to the First Customers Podcast. Today we have Marty M. Fahncke with us. He is the acquisitions advisor for Westbound Road. He's done over $1 billion in revenue and over $450 million in acquisitions over his career. Marty, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paris. I'm honored to be here.
So let's get right into it. How'd you get those first customers?
Well, that's always the question, right? I love the theme of your podcast. When I first got invited to be on here, I listened to it. I thought it was really exciting, and I appreciate the opportunity. I started thinking about how did I get my first customers for my current company, and even though my company's 4 years old, as I really thought about this topic, which is so unique, I realized that my first customers really came over 20 years ago that created what I have today, and in the most grassroots manner. And I'm wondering, can I tell that story?
Sure.
All right, cool. So go way back in time, about 1999, and me and two guys had gotten together, and one of the guys had invented a sporting goods product. It was a soccer training product. And he had called a buddy of his and said, "Hey, I've got this product. I've invented it. I think it's a great idea. I don't know how to bring it to market. I don't know how to get it manufactured." And this guy said, I can get it manufactured, and I know the guy that can bring it to market. So the three of us formed a partnership and developed this soccer training product. And it was a device that had a waist belt, and then its elastic strap, and then this sleeve that went around the ball. And kids could kick the ball and practice speed drills or kicking accuracy drills and whatnot without having to kick a soccer ball off the garage door and break the garage or off a wall or whatever else. And so we developed the first iteration of it. And when I say grassroots, I mean really grassroots. And here's why. Across the street from my house was a big park that had about a dozen soccer fields. And every given hour of any given day on the weekend, those fields were full of kids playing soccer. So what we did is we created the first iteration of the product, and we went across the street, and I took my kids with me, and they were about the right age of the same, kids playing soccer there. And we set up a little table, and my kids would get the product strapped on, and they'd start kicking the ball and bouncing it back and forth and doing all these fun things with it. And kids would just flock. They wanted to see, what is this thing? That's cool. Really, really awesome. And as the kids would come, they'd drag their parents over, and the parents would come, and I'd talk to them, and we started making sales. And when I say grassroots, obviously we were literally standing on the grass selling this product. And so we learned a whole lot of things in this process that led me to where I am today. And I wanted to talk about, first customers. Well, I can literally remember, even though it's been over 20 years, I can literally remember those first customers coming to me, and they were the kids, right? 8, 9, 10-year-old little kids. And their eyes were just big because they saw something that completely blew them away. Why? Because it was a highly demonstrable product with an immediately understood benefit, right? From across the soccer field, they could see it and go, "I understand that. I want it, and I want it today." And they would drag their parents over, and we began the process. Now, what else did we learn from those very first customers? Well, we learned that we had done some kind of market research or some asking around, and it wasn't a super complex product, and it wasn't a super expensive product to make. And people said, "Oh, you should charge about $12 for that, $12.95." Okay. So we started charging $12, and what we found out was it was a really pain to make change. And 20 years ago, most people had cash, and everybody would hand us a $20 bill. And so we said, well, wonder what would happen to our sales closing ratio if we charged $20 instead of $12 and didn't even mess around with giving change. Well, guess what happened to the closing ratio? Nothing. Sold just as many for just as many people that walked up as we had before. So we learned that just because the market tells you your product should be priced at one point, the market can actually bear even more.
So that's something that might be different now where, we're swiping a card, that $12 versus $20 might make a bigger difference. But back then, if it's mostly cash, there's a convenience of just charging 20.
There was a convenience. I would submit that today it'd be even easier because there's a visceral reaction to handing over a $20 bill that is much stronger than swiping, right? That's
For
part of
sure.
why we could go into all sorts of things here about,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, the debt, the current, level of debt of Americans and things like that, because it's so much easier to spend money on a card than it is cash
Yeah.
because you don't see it going out. Today,
Super
I'd probably
friction.
charge $30 or $35 for that product and probably have zero impact on the sales.
So I've seen these products. Were you guys the first to make those?
We were the very first patented product. Yes.
Really?
Yeah. The very
Got
first
one of
ones.
those. Yeah, I got one of those for my kids when they were playing soccer. That's
Awesome. How
crazy.
many did you buy?
I think we just bought one.
Okay. So here's something else we learned is that if your product is good,
Mhm.
sometimes you can have more than one cell. So we would find
Right.
that we would have a parent come up, and if they had one kid, we'd sell one unit. But we quickly learned that if they had more than one kid with them, they don't want to share. They don't want to have to fight
Right.
over it. So we immediately started bundling. Say, hey, it's one for 20 or two for 30, right? Great. Started
Gotcha.
selling a lot more. We very quickly had an average units per sale of 1.5 on every transaction. But here's what we really learned. Kids drive demand and parents give in and buy one. They drag them over. Mom, I got to have this. Okay, well, how much is it? 20. Okay, fine, here it is. But any kids that had grandparents there, they'd come over, and the grandparents, those kids drive that demand, and the grandparents want to delight their grandkids. And so they're much less reluctant. And what we found is that most grandparents have multiple grandkids. And so our average units per cell went up to 3.5 whenever a grandparent would show up. So light bulb,
Smart.
what did we learn from those first sales? Potentially grandparents are more lucrative than parents. And this is something that we never could have really learned without that really on the ground, in your face, right there, dealing with customers and seeing what's really happening day in and day out. Okay. Because
Yeah.
the original vision of this product, by the way, was always to put it on television, because back then I was a TV guy. I had been doing TV promotions and DRTV and infomercials and home shopping.
Oh wow.
And had I put it right on TV, I would have made some major mistakes. But getting that face-to-face grassroots helped with some learning. So I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. So the other thing that it allowed us to do is, over a period of time, it allowed us to do product improvement. We would sell the units, the kids would take them home, and they'd come back the next Saturday and they'd say, you know what, this didn't quite work as well as I thought it would. And so we actually had 3 different product improvement phases over a pretty short period of time, where we realized that the way the strap was manufactured wasn't quite right. It needed to be different because the ball would pop out. We wanted to stop that from happening. So we put 4 straps instead of 2. We realized that we had judged the size of the Velcro waist belt to be too big, because most kids are only that big around. We made it a little too big. So we actually, whenever anybody would come up and say, hey, I bought this, but it's not the greatest, I would take their name and number, and then when the new batch came in that had been revised, I'd just give them one for free. Thank you for your feedback. Here's a new and improved version. Give us your feedback. So I was soliciting customer feedback continually, and we kept our isolated audience of that kind of small town, and we sold a couple thousand units. But because we kept our audience isolated, as we were iterating, we started with an MVP, and then we iterated improvements from there. We also kept down any potential for negative feedback or negative comments or customer complaints to a scalable model. We took those customer complaints, we took that customer feedback, and we iterated until we had something that was ready to go big. And I see a lot of people who kind of start day one and they blast it out, and their product really wasn't ready. And it can kill a company from day one if you release a product, software, something like that really customers aren't happy with. Word of mouth spreads, bad reviews spread, and customer sentiment goes bad. And you can really destroy a business without first isolating a nice subset of your audience and finding out what is it really serving their needs? Is the value proposition there? Are the benefits really there? And are the features there? So that really allowed us to do that. Now,
Yeah, that goes along with a common pattern we see, all about getting connected to that target audience that you're trying to serve and getting as much feedback and joining the conversation as much as possible.
Conversation, exactly.
That seems to
And
be
it
the one of the
wasn't
best.
surveys. It was literally face to face. Hey, I bought this last week and it doesn't fit my kid. How do we? Okay, great. And we fixed it. The ball and everything else. And so we worked really quickly to because we had it. It was a short season, right? Summertime. We were really quickly to try and iterate and get this in place so that
How
we
long
could
does it
create
take
the
to
best product.
iterate a physical product? Like, because you have to manufacture. I don't know how big of a manufacturing it was, but that seems like there's a lot involved.
Well, we started out manufacturing it. Basically, one of the founders was manufacturing in his garage. And so
Wow.
it wasn't at scale, but it was able to turn around and say, oh, let's try adding this strap here and let's try doing that. And so we created 100 units, went out and sold them, created another 100 units, went out and sold them, created another 100 units. And each 100 units was getting progressively better until we had what we knew to be the absolute best unit. Now,
Wow.
obviously that can't scale very well. So what was the next phase? The next phase, scale the marketing, scale the manufacturing. So we found a manufacturer who could then, build the product at large scale, but that does take time. We wound up having the product manufactured in Mexico. Actually, we looked at China, and the quality was just horrible. We went to Mexico, and we actually found a really good manufacturer in the Maquiladora area who was able to manufacture that. We took our learnings from those Saturday morning in the park interactions and used what we learned from there about who buys it, why they buy it, what gets them excited, what lights up the kids' eyes, and what do the kids say to the parents to get them to actually pull out their credit card or pull out their cash. And we used that to create a script for a television commercial and put it on the air. And we very quickly sold $300,000 worth of product. Really nice.
And that's the early 2000s at that point, or is that still 99?
That would have been in the spring of 2000. Yep.
Okay.
And with those learnings, we obviously, from a standpoint of going on from being in the park to now going on TV and having orders come through telephone and online, there were other things to learn. And then once we kind of put together, we really knew now, okay, we know now exactly what the customer's looking for, who they are, what they want to buy. Then we went to QVC. And as I mentioned before, we knew that parents are great, grandparents are better. When we looked around and said, where do grandparents buy their product? At that time, QVC was a behemoth in the marketing space, and it was doing billions of dollars in sales, and it was primarily grandparents. So we took all of that learning that we had in all of the data, and we presented it at QVC and said, we've got something big here. Put us on the air. They did, and we were right. And we wound up selling another $1 million worth of product over the rest of that summer.
So pause right here, because there might be some younger entrepreneurs listening and they're like, what? TV, QVC, what are these things? And QVC was like where people would sell these. It was just a channel of commercials basically for selling products, and people would be on there pitching things, and you'll still see these infomercials. And another question younger folks might be asking is, why didn't you just put that video on Facebook or YouTube? Well, in 2000, YouTube and Facebook didn't exist yet.
You're absolutely right.
2004 is when those both launched, I think.
That's
and
right.
So that was the way to get mass distribution, was mostly like TV and radio.
Yep.
So that's really interesting little piece of business history here. It's like you were right before, the online scalability happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll throw some other trivia. So first of all, QVC was in the home shopping. So some people have heard of Home Shopping Network, QVC. They were both shopping 24-hour, 7-day a week live shopping channels. They continue to this day to do about $4 to $5 billion a year in sales. They have global footprint. And again, the audience is definitely skews older. So if you're a younger entrepreneur, you've probably never even heard of it. But it's on your channel. You can go through your channel guide right now and you'll find QVC and HSN, and you'll be fascinated. And there's a lot you can learn from those, by the way. They have pioneered so many things that we take for granted today, that they, because they have such a massive footprint, there's a lot of things that electronic marketers and digital marketers have learned to take it from them.
For sure. But what was the cost, for, just to give some context? Because today you record a selfie on your phone showing your product, put it on the internet. You can do that for free on your social accounts and get pretty good reach. So what did it cost to produce a commercial for your product back then?
We spent probably $20,000 to produce that commercial. And and buying time, you could buy spots for as little as $10 each on small local
Really?
TV stations across the country. And sometimes there were more. Sometimes, a big one like in Los Angeles or New York might be $300.
Is that like a
Smaller
day,
ones
like
might.
per
That was
showing
per
of your
airing. Per
per
airing,
airing?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
per airing.
Well,
So if commercial runs, you paid $10 for it, you sell one unit, you've made money, right?
yeah,
And the bigger ones, obviously if you're paying more, you're gonna get more. So
interesting.
interesting though, the home shopping model is different, where they actually they sell it and then they pay you a revenue split basically. So your profit margin
Okay.
is built in. You have no upfront costs other than providing inventory, and they've got the distribution footprint. And at any given moment, you might have a couple 100,000 people watching at any given moment. So yeah, so that was 1 year of effort. So from standing in the park selling it at $20 a piece to doing $1 million in sales on TV was 1 year.
Wow.
What happened next was really cool for 3 young entrepreneurs who just kind of had an idea and executed on it.
Yeah.
Somebody came knocking on our door and said, "We love what you're doing. We love your product, and we would like to buy your company."
Whoa.
Totally beyond anything that we had ever even comprehended or thought about. And we were like, "Okay, well, we're open to that. What are you offering?" And they said, "We'll give you $1.5 million and we'll take over your company." That was all the money in the world at that time, right? So
Right.
we took $1.5 million cash, sold the company, and walked away. Now, here's what brought me to where I am today: is that later on I found out that I shouldn't have taken that cash. I didn't need the cash. I was fine. Little cash would be nice, but I didn't need that much money.
The company was
What
profitable at that point?
company was profitable.
Yeah.
We were growing. We had just expanded out to be on QVC in Japan, and we were in Brazil. We were
Wow.
in the UK. We were growing really, really rapidly.
Yeah.
What I didn't know, because if the me now could have gone back in time to the me back then and said, "Don't sell the company for cash." That $1.5 million sounds like a wonderful deal. But what you should do is ask questions. The
Mm.
questions I should have asked are, who are you and why do you want to buy my company? I didn't ask those. I just said, is your check going to clear, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What I found out was that it was a private equity firm who was rolling up our business into a consolidation of other sporting goods related businesses. And
Mm.
eventually they rolled that up into several well-known public entities brands that you've heard of and probably have in your house today, and went public with it in a big
Whoa.
way. I went back and did an analysis, and had I taken equity instead of
Mm.
cash,
Yeah.
we would have made $24 million.
Woo.
Because there's a huge arbitrage difference in valuation of a business that's doing $1 million a year versus a business that's doing $1 billion a year. And these private equity firms that are doing these roll-ups understand that. And I didn't understand it at the time. So what I wish I
Yeah.
would have done, and I wish somebody would have told me, is, hey, take half the cash and put the other half in equity, which would have given me personally $250,000 when we sold the business, which is plenty.
Yeah.
And it would have given me, would have given us as a collective partnership, about $12 million to split. So $4 million each, 12
Yeah.
years down the road. Would I rather have had that? Heck yeah. So that kind of was the beginning of my journey into buying and selling companies and understanding the value there and the creation and how all that works. And what got me into doing mergers and acquisitions, because I want to help other entrepreneurs who have businesses to be able to accomplish their dreams with their business, whether it's selling all of it, whether it's selling partial, retiring, or leveraging that business to create something new, buying businesses to scale their businesses. There's so many things, and it became a passion for me. But it was really those first customers, $20 a piece in a soccer field, that led me to now doing instead of $20 deals, doing $20 million deals.
That's awesome. So I've got some questions to kind of balance out that part of the story about, or that piece of advice about, hey, make sure you always take some equity. In that case, it seems that once you've switched gears to saying, all right, I'm not just interested in selling for cash, I'm interested in getting some equity in whoever I sell to, then it becomes much more important who you sell to. Because if it's just for
Absolutely.
cash, who cares who takes it over, as long as you don't get defamed somehow, your reputation. If you get the cash, you walk away with all the value that you were going to get at that moment.
Right.
But if you're getting equity, then it really matters who's taking the reins and who's going to be leading it, because I've heard or been close to or kind of associated with projects where they get bought and they just fall apart because of mismanagement. That seems like something that's common, depending on who it
It
sells
does.
to.
It can happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is so that's why it's careful to understand, ask questions and understand, if you are selling your business, who's buying it and why,
Yeah.
and what is their plan for it? Because that can impact, 60% of entrepreneurial businesses, when they are sold, have some sort of earnout factor or seller financing factor. Those are critical. You've got to understand who's buying your business and what are they going to do with it, because you're mitigating that risk as to whether you're going to get your future revenues against it. So
Right.
I'm not saying equity is always retaining some equity is always the right thing to do. Without question, it's not always the right thing to do. In my case, it was, and I didn't even know it was an option.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, as entrepreneurs out there who are thinking about buying or selling a business, you need to be thinking about all of the ways that you can do the deal right to accomplish your goals.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, then find someone who does and bring them alongside to help you.
So now let's bridge that gap between, all right, you learned that lesson eventually, looking back at that first project. How did you go from that cash out to starting and getting into the mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah, sure. So left that business once we sold it, and then went to work with an infomercial company actually in California. Little trivia: 2001, I was the very first person to ever put a URL on an infomercial. So that seems so
Oh,
weird
wow.
today
Yeah.
to think about, but at the time, people were terrified. Infomercial companies who were doing $100 million, $200 million a year, by putting toll-free numbers on their things and controlling the customer conversation and controlling the upsell path, we're terrified about, I'm not going to put a website on there and then go off to the wild, wild west and we'll never see them again. And we can't control it. It was a fascinating time.
Yep.
And we kind of pioneered it. We put the very first URL out there, and we figured out how to marry TV marketing with digital marketing. And I started a business that we were doing about $1.5 million a year in revenue. And I had a competitor who was kept bumping into me all over the place. And this was before Google. The search engine of the time was Yahoo. That was the big search engine back then. They were kicking my butt in Yahoo. This was shortly after Yahoo introduced paid keyword searches, which is, again, ubiquitous today. That was brand new back then. And you could get 5-cent clicks back then that were really valuable. But they were kind of outmaneuvering me in some places, and I was really frustrated. And I went to my CEO and I said, "Look, these guys are doing this and they're doing that, and they're somehow they're able to move faster than we are. I don't know how, but our team's good, but they seem a little bit better." And he said, "Well, if they're that good, why don't you go buy them?" I said, "I don't know. I never thought about that." And he goes, "Yeah, go see if they'll sell to us." So I called him up and I said, "Are you interested in selling your business?" And when most people get that call, entrepreneurs, they get that call, they're, well, I don't know. It depends on how much, right?
Yeah.
So the guy said, "Yeah, I'd be open to it," and we talked, we had some conversations, found out they were doing about $2 million a year. I was doing about 1.5. So combined, we were doing about 3.5 million in sales. So we agreed to merge our businesses. We acquired them. By the way, they took a substantial amount of stock in that deal, some cash, a lot of stock. And 2 years later, if my business was doing 1.5 million and their business was doing 2 million, how much do you think we were doing 2 years later as a combined entity?
I'll guess 5 million.
$30 million.
Woo! Look at that.
We grew a $1.5 million business and a $2 million business. We put them together. We did $30 million the second year.
That's amazing.
Just a great synergy between what we were able to offer with some major distribution points that they didn't have, access to products that they didn't have at prices they couldn't get. They had some really great marketing tactics that we weren't able to really replicate, and just a really great team. And that was a case of 1 and 1 not making 2, 1 and 1 made 11.
So did you were you able to merge the websites in such a way that you weren't having to compete with each other in search, like pay per click
We
wise?
actually kept them separate so that we would have more footprint in search.
Gotcha.
Um, didn't make
Yeah.
sense to merge them; made sense to keep them separate. And
Did you put
each website had its own kind of customer profile, a little
okay?
bit of a separate personality, but there were enough back office synergies and things like that. We supported each other instead of competing with each other.
So did you organically? I understand keeping the footprint. Did you also bid against each other still?
No, we were coordinating our bids. So instead of bidding
Nice.
against each other for
Right.
keywords,
Yeah.
we were,
Yeah.
artificially keeping our bids low. So we were
That's
lowering our
awesome.
marketing costs,
Yeah.
increasing our margins, and cross-selling our customers. So every customer from one would get, because we had some different
Yeah.
product selections and things like that. So if we sold to one customer, that automatically would get added over to this list and we'd be cross-selling and cross-promoting back and forth.
Yeah. It seems like that simple little adjustment alone is worth the acquisition of totally changing your marketing costs, because you could say, oh, wait, what are you guys bidding on? Okay, well, we'll bid on this. You bid on that. We
Yep.
can both attack what we're most likely to rank for and just dominate. That's awesome.
Yep. That's exactly what we did.
Love that. Those early search engine days were incredible on the
Oh,
opportunity.
it was the Wild West back then, and it was fun.
Yeah.
I also had an affiliate program with 27,000 affiliates. It was one of the earliest affiliate programs. That was growing like crazy. So back to where I am,
Mhm.
why I do what I am today. So that was lesson number 2. So lesson number 1 was somebody came along, bought my business for $1.5 million, thought it was all the money in the world, thought it was the coolest deal in the world. It was really pretty small in the grand scheme of things. Lesson number 2 was, oh, I have a business. There's a business like mine that's competing with me. Instead of continuing to compete, let's acquire them and work together. That worked really well. Grew that business from $1.5 million to $30 million. We eventually went public in that the umbrella company that was also private equity based or backed. So we had some capital to make those acquisitions, which was wonderful. And then I left that business, started a business that was in the education space. Ran that for 3.5 years, and then I sold it. Another profitable exit, and so I'm like, well, I'm kind of liking this buying and selling businesses thing. I continued to grow businesses organically through a combination of marketing, innovative and creative marketing strategies, and some acquisitions. But it took me a really long time to just focus on acquisitions as the primary and marketing as the secondary, even though over that time I did do $1 billion in sales. But it wasn't until about 2018, 2019 that I'd bought and sold a couple of other businesses and been involved in some other transactions and some mergers and everything else that I realized I really want to do this full time. This is what I want to do. I want to own a great portfolio of companies who are synergistic, do business with each other, and really control kind of this empire that fits in my wheelhouse. So
Yeah.
I started making a concerted effort to finding businesses to acquire. And I went right back to my grassroots, right? I went one-on-one cold call. I didn't
Wow.
go out to, the brokerage sites or anything. Well, I did to kind of do some research, but I'd already been told that working with brokers was a huge pain in the ass. True. Those brokerage sites have a lot of garbage on them. True.
Yeah.
And so I had been told by people in the know, like the best way to find deals is literally cold call and find those deals that are off market, private deals that you can deal with face to face without a bunch of people involved. So I said, okay. So I got back to dialing for dollars. And after doing $1 billion in sales, I literally was cold calling on the phone, emailing and LinkedIn and saying,
Wow.
hello, are you interested in selling your business?
What businesses did you target?
So
Like
I
what
was
type? Was there a
targeting at
certain
that
profile that
time,
you had?
pardon me?
Was there a certain profile that you would come up with? Like, this is the
Yeah,
type
so
of
I've
business?
had a lot of success in e-commerce. So I was focusing primarily on e-commerce businesses.
Okay.
So I've done hundreds of $1 million in sales in e-commerce. So I was looking at those types of businesses primarily, but I also was looking at businesses that were complementary to that. So for example, one of the first acquisitions I made was a bookkeeping business. Why? Well, it was a bookkeeping business that I was already using. A couple of my businesses were already using them for bookkeeping. And I went and said, hey, I'm about to do a bunch of acquisitions. I could probably bring you, 10 new deals, 10 new clients. If I consolidate all my stuff with you guys, would you be willing to give me a percentage of your business? And they were like, Yeah, absolutely. It was
Wow.
literally a 20-minute call. And so I took a percentage of that company and still own it today, right?
Awesome.
We acquired a company that was a gluten-free beer company. And part of that was a huge promotion to do swag, like koozies and sweatshirts and hats and all that kind of stuff. And so I realized that a lot of my companies needed that. I buy logo hats for my company and all sorts of stuff. It's a big thing that we do. Well, who does that? So I found a company that does that. We acquired part of that company. So now we do business with ourselves. If we want to buy a logo wear, we buy it from our own company. If we want bookkeeping, we buy it from our own company. So we're looking at businesses that are in our wheelhouse of e-commerce, but also who serves those e-commerce. So whether it's 3PL, packaging, printing, you name it, if it's in that supply chain, I want to have an ownership piece of it. So I was cold calling and getting great response. People are, yeah, sure, I'm interested in selling. I'd look at the business, and if I wanted to acquire it, great, we'd acquire it, form some partners, put some money together to make that happen. But more often than not, I didn't want to acquire it. More often than not, there was something about the business that said that I didn't particularly want it. So I'd say, hey, great, it was nice looking at your business. It was nice meeting you. I'm not interested in making you an offer, but have a nice day. And then they would come back and say, well, wait a minute. Now you got me excited. I want to sell my business. You don't want it. Can you help me find somebody who does? And I said, well, it's not really what I do, but maybe I can help you. And from that, Westbound Road was born in 2020, which was perfect timing because mergers and acquisitions has been going on fire since then. And we help those sellers find buyers. We help buyers find sellers. And we help people create strategy around growth through acquisition and marketing. And but it all started literally with just, again, grassroots cold calling, picking it. And by the way, when I say cold calling, I know I'm old. I got a gray beard, and I'm talking about stories from back 20 years ago. Taking $20 bills. But I will tell you that if you can't get through to somebody on LinkedIn and you can't get them to respond to your emails, you'd be surprised how often they'll pick up the phone. And you can get a hold of people. So don't forget that age-old contraption that sometimes you can actually reach people on.
Yeah. So was it a lot of creative deals, you'd say, or is it more just cash mergers when you started buying up companies? Like that one where you said, hey, I'll bring you deals if you give me a percentage. Like that's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's an
a lot of
amazing
creative
move.
deals.
Okay.
A lot of creative deals. It's shocking how easy it is to do acquisition deals without having to take a ton of money out of your pocket.
Man, I feel like we need a master class from you. We need more than one podcast. This is so interesting. I want to be you when I grow up. This is incredible.
It's fun being me, I had to admit.
No, that's awesome. Can you talk about why do you think mergers and acquisitions exploded in 2020?
So opportunity combined with cheap money. So opportunity was, 2020 with the global pandemic, a ton of businesses were either struggling. It really created a divide in businesses. Businesses were either really struggling or they got loaded with cash. A lot of it, government cash, EIDL, PPP cash. In my space, e-commerce had exploded because everybody had to buy stuff and have it shipped home, right? Stores were closed. So the e-commerce business went crazy. So there was a lot of cash flowing. There was zero interest rates. There were a lot of investments being made. And on the sell side, there were a lot of sellers going, I just made a gob of money, I'm out, and wanted to sell their businesses. And so it was just one of those perfect storms of everything coming together to create what in 2021 was the largest year for mergers and acquisitions in the world history.
Really?
Trillions of dollars of acquisitions happened in 2021. Now, 22, things started slowing down because interest rates started going up. But it's still, especially in kind of the small business sector, the small to medium business sector, it is still very hot. If you want to sell your business, there are a ton of buyers out there. And if you want to buy a business, there are a lot of great businesses out there in the, under a couple $1 million range. There's constantly people looking to retire. There's constantly people looking to sell their business so they can start something else. There's constantly buyers wanting to buy a lifestyle business so they can become digital nomads and quit their job and control their own destiny. People get divorced. People get sick. There are always businesses for sale, and there's always businesses to buy, especially in the small business sector.
I guess that there's been, I think, one experience where I got ownership of a business by saying, hey, I'll, apply my skills. I've got these skills. I'll apply these skills and I'll spend a little bit of money on advertising, and let's exchange ownership.
Yep. That's called an earn-in.
Okay.
And it's a very common way of gaining. And let's be clear, what you just said and what I've talked about with the companies.
Yeah.
Acquisitions doesn't always mean 100% of a business.
Right.
I don't always want to own all of the business. Sometimes I only want to own a percentage of it for various reasons, risk management, time, things like that. And so if you could own 100% of $1 million business,
yeah,
or you could own 10% of $10 million businesses, your equity is the same, but your opportunity skyrockets.
Gotcha. And you're not having to manage because you're not the 100% responsible. So there's other people. Yeah.
Right. So that's an opportunity that, you can build a portfolio of cash flowing, profitable businesses that are providing you consistent income, as well as huge paychecks when they're acquired. Right. And you don't necessarily have to be trying to run all these businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I've fallen into at different times, is trying to start so many projects or have so many things that you're trying to get off the ground that you just get spread so thin that everything's just growing really slow. And I think that's a really cool approach, where if you're just, partial ownership in things that are already, they already have traction.
It's much less risk too. Starting new stuff. I mean, starting anything new, 9 out of 10 of them fail, right? But investing in existing things that are already proven, 9 out of 10 of them succeed.
Wow. So are you still mostly in the e-commerce space?
We do primarily digital types of businesses. So e-commerce, SaaS, publishing, digital agencies, all those sorts of things are our bread and butter. We also do a lot of service-based businesses. So we'll do design businesses, air conditioning, plumbing, heating, things like that. What we don't do is brick and mortar businesses. We're not looking for restaurants and gas stations and dry cleaners and things like that. We're looking for service-based businesses that are relocatable, preferably, or delivered virtually. And about 60% of our clients are outside the United States. So we have a lot of clientele. Really? We have a lot of European entrepreneurs who built really great businesses. We have a ton of stuff in the publishing space over there. And we wind up selling them to North American buyers. So whether in the U.S. or Canada, it's pretty common for us to find buyers in the U.S. for European and Eastern European businesses, because it's really hard for them. They're really smart people who, great entrepreneurial spirit, build solid businesses, but there's not really the acquisitions climate in some of those countries for, you build it, who am I going to sell it to? So we've really developed a great way to pair, buyers with sellers that are, and borders really don't matter, right? If the business, if it's e-commerce, if it's a SaaS, if something like that, borders really have no bearing on it.
Can you give an example? You don't have to name a specific business, but of what a publishing business, like, is that just like content sites, or can you give an example of those?
It could be content sites. We have a lot of like membership coaching, like coaching sites, membership sites, like marketing membership. We also have, even some of them are truly publishing. Like we've sold several in the actual book publishing space, things like that. So children's education, English as a second language, reading programs, language training programs, things like that are all kind of considered in the publishing space. But the customers are paying a monthly fee and getting content for their kids or for themselves or whatever, but it's really content that they're buying.
Can you give like maybe a rough profile of like what do you consider like a healthy business or a business worth getting involved
Oh
with?
yeah, absolutely. So a healthy business is one that has a profit.
Sure.
Number one. Number two, has processes and procedures that are well documented. That's something that a lot of entrepreneurial businesses lack. And by the way, if they would do this part, the profit part would come. But
Mhm.
having standard operating procedures, having the ability for anybody who's in the company to be able to do a process and have it understand what they're doing, is very critical. And what that leads to is important factor number three, which is a business that can operate successfully without the owner having to put in 60 hours a week. So if the owner has to put in 60 hours a week, then who's going to buy it? Because they're just buying themselves a job at 60 hours a week, and nobody wants that.
Right.
So you need to be able to have a business that your business can operate without you as the owner having to be there to run it. And if you have those three things, then you've got a business that has lots of people who will want to buy it.
Wow. Okay. So profitable, standard operating procedures, and um, not having to be run directly by the owner.
Right.
Okay. Some good goals for people listening if they're wanting to sell their business.
Well, and I'll tell you something else. Even if you never want to sell your business, if
Yeah.
you go through the steps of creating a business that's sellable by cleaning up your financials, cleaning up your processes, putting systems in place and people in place so that you as an owner can step away from your business a little bit, even if you never sell it, you've got a heck of a lot better business than you did before, because a lot of business owners can't do that. And
Yeah.
so doing the steps to get your business ready for sale, oftentimes we'll have a business owner who thinks they want to sell it, and then they do everything we tell them to do, and then they look around and go, actually, I really like this business now. I'm going to hold on to it. Why would I sell it? Great.
Right.
That's works for us too, But
Yeah.
when they called us, they were working 60 hours a week and the business was killing them. And so just the act of getting your business ready to sell, even if you never sell it, is going to benefit you.
Now, do you have any content online that helps people go through this process, or is it they need to engage with you as a client of yours?
It's interesting you say that. We're actually working on a course right now that will be released well, I don't know when this recording will come out, but we're planning to release it right now on February 14th, which is Valentine's Day.
Okay.
As an act of love to our customers, it's a course on how to prepare your business for sale. But for the most part, this is something that we provide as a service and help. It's usually pretty complex. There's a
Yeah.
lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of a lot of questions that need to be asked, and a lot of different ways things need to be looked at. So it's a service that we provide to help business owners get their business ready to sell so they can get the maximum value for it and accomplish their goals.
Okay. Yeah, I think the timing of this episode might be right before then or right near that time. Couple weeks from this
Cool.
recording date. Um, Other than the course itself that you guys are going to offer, are there any books you might recommend to entrepreneurs who are kind of on this journey of trying to build a great business, sell a business, or maybe even acquire a business?
Oh, that's a good question. It's funny. I listened to some of your episodes, and I knew you were going to ask about books, and I didn't think about acquisition books. I thought about first customer type of
That's
things.
fine too. Yeah. Anything.
So you threw me for a loop there, which is dumb. I should have thought of that. Because like I said, I've listened to a couple episodes of your show. I really like it, by the way. I just love the
Love to hear that.
concept behind it. It's just taking that foundational thing and scaling it.
Yeah.
So I will say the one I was going to say anyway, which
Yeah.
is Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini.
Yeah.
Whether it's talking about first customers or whether it's talking about multi-million-dollar acquisitions, those principles of influence, reciprocity and social proof and all the things that you learn in that book will help you no matter what. And it's a highly recommended book. I've actually worked with Dr. Cialdini, and we've shared the stage
Really?
together at some conferences, and I just
Wow.
highly respect him. So I would recommend that book because understanding influence helps you create the messaging for your business. It'll help you negotiate. It'll help you understand what your customers are. And again, so whether it's whether it's first customers or whether it's big deals, I think that's a really fantastic book to understand.
Awesome. We'll add a link to the show notes to that one for sure. Well, this has been an incredible episode. This is right in the alley of my personal goals in business, is this kind of area of wanting to get into mergers and acquisitions and
great,
kind of going down that path. So this is super interesting. Definitely going to be following along with what you're doing on social media, and we'll put links to your LinkedIn and different things in the show.
And I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I put a lot of content out there. So I mean, if you're interested in this journey, I do a lot of podcasts, I do a lot of recordings, but we're putting a lot of content out, and you just follow me on LinkedIn, you'll get an education.
All right. Well, that's another episode of the First Customers Podcast. Marty, thank you again. This has been a great episode.
Thanks, Paris. Appreciate being here.
See everybody next time.